So we're just over at Webster Race Engineering with Jon, who's been doing the Sport Quattro RS3 project for us. All the metal work Jon's doing at the moment, you'll see on the video, but we thought we'd just have a quick chat with Jon about what he's done, how long it's taken, basically anything that he can put into the conversation that's interesting for the viewers, basically. So we took a 69 plate RS3 and a short wheelbase replica Audi Quattro. Jon got the RS3 as a complete rolling shell, but the Sport Quattro came as sort of a cut-out version inside.
Yeah, no floor pan or bulkheads.
No floor pan and stuff, but it did have a V10 in it originally from an RS6, which you came and looked at. It came to us from another place up north like that, but after a conversation with Jon and Jon working out certain things about it, he called it the cantilever system, didn't you? It would be too short and too heavy on the front and basically wouldn't handle, so that got axed. And the customer who owns this car had an RS3 with a damaged engine and was prepared to let us have that to then make this project, which was originally Jon's idea. He was like, oh, this floor pan would be perfect for an RS3. And I said, oh, well, he's actually got an RS3. So that's kind of how it started. But what sort of difference on wheelbase is there with the RS3 and the short wheelbase then?
The RS3 was 16 inches longer than this.
So you had to shorten the whole shell, sorry, the floor pan 16 inches.
Yeah, there's quite a convenient point to actually do that.
Right, okay.
Within the original body shell. So I think I sent you the photographs of the stages and stuff like that.
Because you made like a rail system, or it looked like a rail system in the car, so that when you shortened it, it all stayed together correctly. Yeah.
There's an idealistic way of doing this sort of stuff where you potentially would say, scan the RS3, scan the body shell on this, and then you get someone with the right software to morph it, and it will tell you where to cut it and all that kind of stuff. But obviously the time scale and the program for the car didn't really allow that. So
you've done it old school.
Old school, yeah.
So how you do everything, I think.
Yeah.
You know.
So in theory, again, you would sort of maybe strip the RS3 body shell to just a shell.
Yep.
And then go about sort of morphing the two together. But in a lot of ways, what that would allow you to do is maybe put it on a jig as a structure before you cut it and all that kind of stuff. Was the Quattro came already cut up, so
it had already been cut prior to us receiving it, so you can't really do it that way as such, can you?
So it made sense to keep the RSC complete as a rolling chassis as such, with all the drivetrain in it. That way we could, every time we put the body shell of the Quattro close to it, it had everything on it, like the wheels and all the suspension turrets and engine and axle and that kind of stuff. So what I did is I constructed a jig within the Quattro, and then I took the jig out of that and offered it into the RS3.
Right, okay. Yep.
So that jig was then fixed to the RS3 with a sliding...
I've seen like a sliding rail thing,
the jig had a sliding sort of member within it, which held it all structurally complete as its stock wheelbase. And then when I was ready to shorten it, we just cut the 16 inches out of it, and the jig
just literally slid together.
We cut it with a 1/4 inch spare, and then the last 1/4 inch was shaved and blended so it fitted perfect for a really nice...
Well, it looks really good. So also, Jon's done a firewall. I don't know if you can see that, Axel. He's done a firewall. He's I call it sways. What do you call it?
Yeah, sways, speed rolled.
Speed rolled. So, and it's got the Audi rings in there, so we're going to use that as a feature. You think you did that on one of Dave Rowe's cars, didn't you? Was it Walter, wasn't it? Yeah. So I saw that on another car and I was, oh, can you do that on this car for the customer? So if we go towards the boot, basically all this structure's all been made and adapted by Jon, obviously. Now the boot, so the original Quattro runs the fuel tank in the boot. The RS3 runs it underneath. But what we're going to do is obviously find a fuel tank, which we're going to drop off to Jon, and then he's going to make that fit nicely in there. And then we'll use the original fuel flap for the fuel system as well. So it'll kind of stay original on the back. And then we're probably going to use the original point there for the battery. We're not sure yet. You're going to have a look at that, aren't you? So, but what we do is sort of give the parts to Jon, and then Jon will look where it's best to put the parts, rather than us just telling him where to put it, because it doesn't work like that, does it?
Yeah.
It's no good.
Sometimes it does.
yeah. If it's a good idea, but you can't really denote on chassis stuff where there's reasons that why you wouldn't put stuff in places.
It's nice to coordinate stuff from partly an aesthetic point of view, but also practical, so maintenance and access for
that sort of thing.
Simple stuff stuff that you've got to do to maintain the cars. So
but I mean, that really, in the back of that car is very much like a Sport Quattro, although some of the architecture is very slightly different. It's not massively different. So obviously it wasn't, you've adapted it a lot, haven't you? But
yeah,
that's going to be really good to have it looking like a Quattro in the boot at least.
yeah.
And then obviously the rest of the outside of the car is going to stay the same. And what have we got? So if we go and look at the dashboard, you've adapted initially the RS3 crossbar and steering column.
Yeah, so it's got the...
It's just kind of tacked in till we put the Quattro dash top on, and then you're going to modify this to suit the underneath of the dashboard. It's just in there now before we get the dash top in. Yeah,
it's basically to jig the steering column in position.
So it's in the right place.
So once we get the proper Quattro dash, that might totally change.
Yes.
So we'll just
you need that on so that you know the steering wheel's in the right place, don't you?
Yes, yeah.
The customer's picked a seat, which is a Recaro pole position. As long as that suits the fitting of the shell, then we'll use that seat. But
yeah, we don't want to compromise because it's essentially a monocoque structure still. So I mean, it's a better monocoque structure probably than the RS3 and probably than the Quattro because we supplement it so much in the sill area with 8th plate sill.
It's like a three plate sill now, isn't it?
Yeah, and the seat structure or what the seat are anchored on, that's part of the monocoque structure as well. So whatever we do to mount the seats, we've got to kind of consider the fact that that kind of structure still needs to be there. Whether that gets taken out, we put something in that's similar but suits the architecture of the seats or whatever, but essentially it will be kind of modified in some way so that the seats he wants to use can be used.
Well, I mean, ultimately the dash and the steering wheel is probably not going to be that far away from where it was in the RS3, is it?
No, I think...
very similar place.
Yeah.
So the seat position of the original seat there might not be that far out.
I'm pretty sure that they'll be about the same, apart from the actual nature of how they're fixed.
And it's just the height then of the seat in the car, so, and then we'll obviously let you work out, because obviously it's got to be somewhere close because otherwise it's not going to reach the gear stick, and that's the whole point of the seat fitting. So Jamie's a similar height to you, I believe, so you'll be able to fit the seat to you, and then that should suit Jamie quite well.
Yeah, and we'll put an element of adjustment in there so you can fine tune it.
That'll be really good. So the rear, so obviously on a Quattro they run quite a high offset wheel. They run an ET24 wheel on the original car. Well, these are like an ET50 something, and they run a smaller tyre a thinner tyre on the rear of an RS3 and a wider one on the front. So we're going to end up with an 18-inch wheel, we think is going to be best, aren't we? So an 18-inch wheel, probably a 9-inch wide, and then we'll find an offset to suit the rear, as long as it's not going to affect the handling any. Then the front, because this car originally, the RS3 was a Sportback, that's 10mm wider each side on the front, and a saloon RS3 runs like a normal hub, like a Golf R. So we'll lose 10mm off the front by running an RS3 saloon front hub and bearing, and then what we'll do then is we'll have more camber because this is stock mounts and we're running a KW Club Sport suspension, so we'll gain some camber which will gain arch clearance. When we lower the car down, the wheel will obviously go in as well, so I think in total we'll end up with quite a nice looking wheel fitted to the car and a nice fitment there. So
yeah, I think it'll look factory, like it come from the factory.
It should do, yeah. That's the idea anyway. So hopefully I can get that right and I don't mess it up. I'll be ringing Jon. So then obviously engine bay, we've still got the ABS there, which is in the original place. We're probably going to fit a Bosch Motorsport ABS system in the car so it fits with the Motec full car, lumen, dash, PDM, etc. The engine's going to be built, but we'll touch more on that later. We've just brought over the Wagner front mount intercooler for Jon. He's going to fit that. That goes, it's going to go in here. Then the front end's all going to be mounted off that, potentially in places.
Yeah.
And then you're going to make a nice little plate that sits on here, aren't you, to deflect the air in, and a nice, like a trim plate, like colour thing.
Tidy it up and make the airflow nicer and stuff.
I'm not going to ask you to try and write Quattro in it with the swaging tool.
I'll do it with Sharpie.
Do it with a Sharpie, even better, yeah, even better. So that's kind of where we're at today with it. How many hours do you think you've spent on it up to now?
Probably today it's about 250, maybe 270, something
270
like
hours of work.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work, isn't it? But it's an awful lot. When you look round, you must be some thinking time in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, like the design, it's design and go.
You can't just stand there and go, oh, I'm going to do this. You must have sat there and thought about it for hours and hours.
Yeah, well, you've got to sort of think 10 steps ahead, really. Well, you need to really know where you're going to start.
The end result.
So you kind of, there's the overall concept, which is one thing, and then there's the reality of achieving that with compromises along the way. But yeah, it's probably, if you had to do it again, you'd probably save maybe 60 or 70 hours.
You reckon you'd save that much?
On the
I think it depends how you got the cars though, because if you had to do it again, you're probably going to end up with a full short wheelbase car again, aren't you?
Yeah,
you'd end up. So then there's a week's worth of work cutting it out.
Yeah, you'd have to prep the Quattro shell.
So you'd probably end up the same if you didn't, unless you got the sport shell as it came originally.
Yeah.
Because that had already been cut out and a floor pan kind of half welded in it, and then we just sort of trimmed that out a little bit and cut the cage structure out, which was in there for strength, just for the floor pan. But you know, so it'd be still. It's the bonnet hinges the next thing, aren't they?
Yeah, because we've lost the aperture, or like the cavity below the
Quattro dash.
The Quattro sort of screen frame. The hinge operates from right underneath there.
It goes underneath, doesn't it, like a Mark 1 Golf?
And it needs the geometry, that sort of geometry, to get the bonnet clear, but we haven't got that now, so we're going to have a dual acting type hinge that like more modern car, probably the RS3.
So we're going to bring the RS3 bonnet hinges over to John with the dash top and a couple of other bits, and then you're going to see if they'll work, and then obviously modify them, because they fit flat under the RS3 bonnet, but they're on an angle on the Audi bonnet, so you'll have to just use the hinge part and then obviously make them fit the bonnet, won't you?
Yeah,
so
you probably have to make. We've modified the inner skin of the bonnet to clear the strut tops of the RS3.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of remedial work to do in this area anyway. So we'll adapt the remedial work to facilitate the hinge fixings.
Yep.
So it'd probably be like a sheet metal inner structure or something that glues in.
So to give it that strength.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the strut tops are quite high, so but to cut the strut top down would change the geometry of the car, wouldn't it? And it's just not a good idea. Whereas or theoretically you'd have to do, this bonnet was been cut already for the RS6 engine, because it was a V10 which stuck out in the middle.
Yeah.
So, but on the back, obviously, what you're talking about cutting is that bit, isn't it, John?
Yeah, this is the area that needs the strut clearance. Yeah.
So then you could make a plate up that goes in there to give it the strength back, basically.
Probably, you've got these mountains here, which I don't think you can use. So we probably take this right out, make
a whole
sheet
new
metal
piece
structure that will take the brackets for the hinges, and hopefully it'll work.
But that's kind of everyday stuff for you, I suppose. When you're building the drag cars, and you're making bits that come up and all sorts, aren't you? So that's that. So we've got another bonnet somewhere, haven't we? We've got a red one. Yeah. So we've got that red sport bonnet. So you can cut the other priceless bonnet up as well. So this was cut up not by us, but it's a shame really, because that was a really good bonnet. Yeah. Basically, this plate that runs across the back here, which is like a strengthening plate, right?
Yeah, so that's the point where the joint is for taking the 16 inches out.
Okay.
So that's a complete
heavy
125 thou plate.
Right.
Going right the way across the car, picking up on the key points of both halves of the structure.
So that's a really strong point of the vehicle.
But I haven't cut the
for the prop,
the tunnel bit out. So what I want to do is bore a hole and reinforce the hole so the prop shaft goes through it, and there's like a safety loop.
So it'd be kind of like a safety loop, like in their axle we see in the Comet there.
Yeah.
See, that's where the prop would run through. So rather than lose the strength from just cutting a U shape in it, which could bend like that, you want to just have a hole in it and the prop go through the middle, basically. Yeah, I don't think it would. I mean, you'd have to
make the structural problem, but if you've got the link right the way across with just a hole in it, it would be substantially stronger.
Well, that's what we want, isn't it?
So
that strength.
For very little actual material, you get quite a bit more strength.
A lot more strength, yeah. And a round hole is always better than a square hole for strength, is that right?
Yeah.
Good.
And there's nothing lighter than a hole.
No, exactly. Yeah, a hole is nothing, so that's good. Good for lightweight. And we're gonna. It's not gonna have any back seats. There's no. That's all going to be trimmed inside, but we'll go into the trimming side of it on another video. But I think that's ultimately it. We know what colour it's going to be. We're not. Well, when we do the bodywork video, then we can go into the colour of the car. But yeah, it's looking really good. So how? Obviously, when we put this video up, it's going to be in a few weeks' time. So by that time, the car will more than likely, you'll have been done with it by then probably.
Yeah.
Depending on your workload, but
yeah,
it will be back at work where we can do the geometry on the suspension and get it to sit right with the wheels, and then, you know, with what wheels we need to order, and then when we've done that, it can go to the body shop and get painted. It'll be good.
It's in pretty good shape, the shell, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you said it's not that rotten, is it? So the bits that would have been rotten were probably already gone. So. Yeah. And the RS3 was a 69 plate, so there was no rot in that. That's good. Well, thank you very much, John.
That's okay.
I appreciate you talking to us.